All right. Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. This is part of the Dharma Toolkit series that we do, which is the first 3 Fridays of every month. It's a new topic that we cover over the course of those 3 Fridays. The 4th Friday of every month is a public talk, and then the next month, new Dharma Toolkit topic. This month, for these 3 weeks, we'll be talking about having an altar at home, setting up an altar, and then also, along with that, the components of a session of meditation that we do. So talking about these 2 aspects of a practice, a home practice, having a place to do one's practice and kind of the different parts of that. And then when one does a session of meditation, what are the parts that are common to any particular session of meditation? This is Shanka's class. Shanka wasn't feeling well today, and I didn't want to just cancel the class, so I said that I would sub in for him for the first class. The feelings and thoughts expressed are my own. We haven't really, worked on this together much, so he will take over for the next 2 classes and maybe explain things differently or go back and give you other points of view. I can just give my own perspective on some things. So as we do, let's start by setting our motivation. So just think about why you were interested in this topic. Kind of earlier today, half an hour ago, what interested you to attend? And then once you're clear on that, try also to intentionally make that interest, that motivation, more broad. So particularly focusing in on how this topic is going to help you to be of benefit to others through having your practice at home, setting it up well. How is that going to benefit you in being of service, helping other sentient beings, and thinking that really the purpose of our participation in tonight's class is to be able to do that, to be able to be more effectively of benefit to others. So just on your own, in whatever way you would like, try to set that motivation. All right. So what Shanka said was that next week he will get into some of the more specific details of the process of setting up an altar. And he had planned to tonight kind of talk about things and to kind of talk about the general context of this process. And then, so I'll do my best to kind of follow that structure, and maybe we'll get into a couple details and some question and answer. And so we don't have to follow any overly strict structure. So when we talk about this idea, so we'll hone in first on this idea of having a place for our practice. And that's really one of the functions that an altar serves. So you can see in the background of my image here is an altar. So when we say altar, generally what we mean is really just a table. It can honestly just be a table. Sometimes an altar could be shelves. It could have different levels, but it could be something that has, a flat surface and also some shelves. But I would say most of the time, we're really just talking about a table. And then so you can see, unfortunately you can't see it. Secret that people is, this is actually not a live image. This is a photograph. This is so I can't actually show you different parts of it or zoom in or things of that, because it is just what it is. So, but you can see how one aspect of setting up a table like this is that you don't just want to have like a plastic table or a wooden table by itself. You can see that there's a, kind of a red tablecloth. Tablecloth doesn't have to be red, can be whatever color you might like. And then on top of that, there's this more colorful cloth. You can see here this kind of more colorful cloth. This is called brocade. So and this is available different websites. Tibetan Spirit is a good website that I send people to for things. FPMT used to sell more physical objects. They kind of got away from that. They have a foundation store, fpmt.org. They have a foundation store. It's a wonderful resource for a lot of practice material, but they've gotten away in more recent years from more of the physical objects, and they're more so just doing practice materials. A lot of that is even just PDFs also. So I highlight this because when we set up an altar, we want to make it attractive. We want to make it pleasing to our own sensibility. And, we want it to some degree also be, many people, I would say, choose to make it in some way kind of historically accurate to Tibetan Buddhism, which is the use of brocade as opposed to something else. But what I want to emphasize too is that one's altar in one's own space is for oneself. This is your altar. And so you should make it pleasing to you. But we do want it to be something that when we look at it, it uplifts the mind. We find it something that we enjoy looking at, that we find calming, that we find peaceful, that we find kind of helps us to shift into, because this is the place where we will meditate. This is the focal point of where we will be doing our meditation at home. So we want to use it to help to create a calm, peaceful, meditative atmosphere. So we want it to be pleasant in that way. And then you can see behind, and we wouldn't necessarily say that the tankas here, these are, and again, unfortunately, you can't really see them all that well because the the image is taken from a lower angle, but they go up. Tankas are not part of an altar, but they can be part of a meditative space where they're another way of displaying holy images, generally of specific enlightened beings. So, and those are a tanka is a fabric painting that you would put on the wall behind the altar or to the sides of the altar. Generally, in your space, you put images of enlightened beings in front of you as you are meditating. So they can be, so wherever you put your cushion, that's kind of in that space. You don't necessarily want to put images of enlightened beings behind that place that you're going to be in the room. There might be times when you move beyond that to do something on the altar. Your cushion might be, 3 feet, 4 feet in front of the altar, and you might approach the altar, and that's fine. But where your seat is, you kind of, you may not want to put images behind you, because then as you're meditating, you've got images, holy images that your back is toward, and that's not so good. So you want them to kind of line the walls to the left and the right. And if they are lining the walls, they can go, behind you, but you don't want to put anything directly behind you. You don't want to put images of enlightened beings where your back is toward. So when we talk about the purpose of an altar in a general way, as I've mentioned, it's the focal point for where we practice. And I would say that it serves, as I said, three main purposes. One, I've kind of talked about, where it sets a tone or it sets a mood. It helps us to shift. It helps us to enter into a meditative space. Because this is, when we are doing other things in the home, we have a different mindset. And then we want to be able to have a space where we associate. And this is sort of just a kind of a common cognitive, psychological way of thinking that, in the same way that they say that, your bed, you shouldn't read in bed or play games or, watch TV, because you want to associate that with sleeping. And if you do other things, you'll have a harder time easily and quickly transitioning into sleep when you get into your bed. In the same way, we want to have an easy time transitioning into a meditative state when we go to where our cushion is and we go into this place in our homes. So that's one purpose of the altar, is to create a sacred space, a meditative space that we begin to associate with our practice, that is calming and peaceful and moves the mind in a way that will help us to meditate. The other purpose of the altar, I would say, is also specifically related to inspiration. So not only does it help us move into a meditative state, but it serves as a place where we get a sense of inspiration. And this happens, I would say, because the altar contains images of enlightened beings, and it probably also would contain images of our teachers. So I would say it contains representations of our own spiritual path, our own spiritual journey, because there's going to be a representation of the Buddha there. There's going to be other enlightened beings. There's going to be images of our teacher. And so these are all showing us the result, the fruit of our practice. What we are trying to achieve is embodied by these representations that are present on our altar. So every single day, we're kind of getting these imprints in our mind of the result, the fruit of our own practice by seeing these representations of enlightened beings on the altar. And that's quite inspirational. That's showing us, what it is that we want to achieve. And then the third purpose of the altar is to have a place to make offerings. This is I would say also a really central or principal purpose to having an altar, is a place to make offerings. So, and we just recently had the first Dharma Toolkit class that we had for this year in January. Geshe Zopa did a series of teachings on the extensive offering practice. So you can review, those are on the YouTube channel, you can review those. He gave wonderful teachings on going into great detail on offerings and how to sort of psychologically relate to the idea of offerings. So what some people struggle with, I think particularly in the West, and what this goes into a broader point about our practice, which is that we should always strive to understand why we're doing something. We should never do anything in relation to our practice just because we know somebody else who said that they were doing it, or we heard or we read something where it was suggested that this is useful or good. We always need, that can be a starting point. That can be like, oh, I've seen, this was recommended in this text, or my friend was talking about this. We can certainly start there, but that's never sufficient to actually do something in our own practice. That doesn't make any sense. If we stop there, if that's like all that we ever think about is like, oh, maybe I'm supposed to, or I heard that I was supposed to, because then everything is just an empty ritual. An empty ritual serves no real purpose. So we always need to understand the psychological reason why we might do something. What role does this actually play in helping me to cultivate some constructive mental state? And that if we can't identify and clearly have confidence that what we're doing is part of helping us to get in touch with, to grow positive mental states, then then we don't yet understand, and we need to get more information. We need to investigate more, and then really once we're clear on how this fits into our spiritual lives, then there's deep meaning behind what we're doing. And so the relationship between the idea of offering and the idea of these positive mental states, I would say we can kind of fit into maybe two categories. One is the idea of training the mind in generosity. And the other, I would say, is related to creating a connection between ourselves and enlightened mind, enlightened energy, enlightened activity, creating trying to grow closer to enlightened mind, enlightened activity through the practice of offering. Because, of course, when we say generosity, generosity is the mind that is able to give without attachment, a mind that is the direct antidote to miserliness, to clinging, to a sense of greediness, covetous mind, kind of a narrow, tight mind. And we could say, of course, that we can also overcome that mind in other ways. We can practice generosity in relation to volunteering our time, providing resources to those who are less fortunate, and all kinds of worldly activities. And that's wonderful. No one's saying that we ought not do that. But it's also true that we don't always have those opportunities. That's, one way of thinking is that we don't always, as we're just sort of going about our day, it's wonderful, of course, to try to find opportunities to be helpful, to offer what's useful or needed in a given situation. But we're not always, we don't always meet with opportunities to really give material possessions or to give our time. However, if we have an altar, in our home, then at a minimum, we have the opportunity to make water bowl offerings every single day. And we'll, as I said, maybe Shanka will go into that in more detail next week, but I think we'll touch on it a little bit today as well. That's something, that we can definitely do, even if we, are snowed in or we don't feel so good, or, we don't have anywhere to be that day. We at least have an opportunity to do that every single day if possible. And that is the practice that is helping us to train in generosity, particularly. And there's different ways of kind of upping the ante with that too. For example, because I think 1,000 years ago, water itself was quite precious. Water itself was not ubiquitous. It was kind of in shorter supply. Whereas now, we take it for granted. We go to the tap and we just expect that there's water. So in a way, we might not think of it, we might not regard it in the same way that it was regarded in the past. So there are things we can do to, kind of practical things that we can do that might help us to make it a more significant offering. One is to use filtered water, because we have to pay for that. So, I would say to try to find a really sustainable, long-lasting way of doing that so that your impact on the environment is quite light. But if we do that, then we start to relate to it a little bit differently. It's actually, we might think, oh, well, this is sort of actually costing me a little bit more than tap water would cost. So that's one option. Another option is to use saffron water. So we can buy saffron and we can make a concentrate of saffron and add a little bit of saffron to the water every day. And saffron is quite expensive. And so that's another way of increasing the act of generosity, by using something that we actually have to pay for. So there's different, I would say those are, two, and you can do both. You can use filtered water that you add some saffron to. So those are ways of really helping you to not take it for granted, to really see it as something that you have put more resources into. Yeah. And then the second function of these offerings isn't just to train in generosity, but it's also the fact that we're making this offering, and this is also a unique benefit of offering in this way. As I said, when we want to train in generosity, there's many ways of doing that out in the world, and those are wonderful and useful. But making offerings on the altar, those offerings are being done in connection to really the three jewels of refuge, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And here particularly, the Arya Sangha, the Buddha, Dharma, the ultimate sources of refuge. And so that is unique. That is different than practicing charity, practicing generosity to, sentient beings. That's also quite important, and it's also a way of training in generosity. But there's a unique benefit to not only making offerings to sentient beings, but also making offerings to the refuge field, to making offerings to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha every day, in that draws ourselves closer to those energies. It creates a greater relationship to those sources of refuge by specifically thinking of this offering as something that is being offered to the field of refuge, the merit field, what have you, rather than just helping a person who needs help. And as I mentioned, Geshe Zopa in the last Dharma Toolkit, talked about the incredible benefits of that kind of offering, thinking of it in that way, thinking of our offerings as being, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, how we, karmically, the ripening of that, the karmic benefits of that specific kind of offering are, Lama Zopa would basically say, that the karmic ripening of this kind of offering really is our enlightenment. That it really has a direct connection to our ability to become enlightened, making this, drawing ourselves closer to the refuge field, to the merit field, creating that connection, and really coming under the care of the enlightened beings through this act of, because the enlightened beings is not like they are, sitting up somewhere, demanding or expecting or requiring that sentient beings show some kind of respect or make offerings to them. But it purifies our own mind. It removes obstacles in our own mind to, to engage in this kind of offering, to engage in this kind of practice, really is an incredibly important and useful part of our own growth and development. And then, of course, we can extend this, as Geshe Sopa said, we can extend this also to daily life too. Of course, in this class, we are focusing on kind of formal practice, but offering practice is also, as Geshe Sopa mentioned, because he was saying, we don't always have that text in front of us. We don't always have our altar in front of us, but we have a beautiful sunset, or we have, witnessing someone's act of generosity or kindness, just in daily life. And so we can also engage in offering all of the time, which was something that he really emphasized as well. So, yeah, so we can do it formally and also informally, or as part of our specific practice or part of our daily life. So let me pause here and ask if there are.
Venerable, we can't hear you.
How long has that been going on?
For hours. No, just a few seconds.
Oh. Sorry. I don't know what, I must have clicked on something. Sorry, so I said that I was going to pause and ask for questions, is what I said. So I don't know, must have clicked on something.
Yeah, I have a question, if you don't mind, Venerable. I get confused with the whole concept of merit field. Does everybody have their own merit field? And when I'm offering someplace else or offering at my altar, does it all go to the same merit field? And if I want to visualize my gurus in my merit field, how do I know to put them there?
So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways. It can be really complex. It can be. I can maybe. Well, yeah, because there is a specific. There are like tankas of the merit field. You can get like so. In the traditional sense, it is kind of an established way of thinking about the lineage of the transmission of the teachings coming from the Buddha, coming down through Lama So. But of course, in a way, it would vary. The Gelugpa approach to that is going to give Lama Tsongkhapa, a really central role in that. Another perspective, another Buddhist tradition would probably have a slightly different way of thinking about it. So when if you Google like, Tibetan merit field, you get you get like a specific image, and it's sort of like this sort of, central figure with these two, the two branches where you've got the lineage of wisdom and the lineage of compassion, or method and wisdom, and then really that image it's kind of indistinct, because the figures are so small, but really there's a lot of specific historical beings that are, and if you, in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, there's a really good, I don't know what page it's on, but there's a clear description of, because it's so complicated. So to actually try to visualize the whole merit field, it's very difficult to do, because really, like when you look at that historical image, like the Tanka, all of those tiny little sort of things, that they're actually people, like they're historical people that are represented. You have the 16 pendants, and you have all of these different historical figures that represent the way that the teachings were transmitted. And the idea is that we're trying to pay homage, to pay respect to all of the causes and conditions that had to come together for this entire lineage, this complete lineage, to be transmitted to the present day. So the historical view is that, and in the monasteries and things, they really do just like a person might try to train in visualizing the Buddha, to do, you would look at an image of the Buddha and then you would like try to bring to mind the details, and you would focus on the eyes and the nose and the ears, and you would try to build that visualization. In the monasteries, they put a lot of time and effort into really doing the same thing with the merit field, and it's just much more difficult because there's so many more figures that are in that. So a much more simplified version, would be, and there's different ones. There's different something, and so I don't want to get it, because I don't want to say it exactly. I don't want to say it in the wrong way, but like the a simplified version, would be like Lama Tsongkhapa, with the Buddha in his heart, and then maybe Manjushri. And there's different ways of doing it, like for different practices. Even like sometimes you might want to have Manjushri if you're doing a certain practice. If you're doing a different practice, you might do a different thing because you're emphasizing a different. So the more simplified versions where it's just like three figures, where it's like the central figure, and then like in the heart, and then in the heart of that figure, kind of the three figures together, that is also a passable or serviceable way of doing the visualization. And it's, of course, so much easier to do it that way. But I rejoice if you really, if you want to really put effort into trying to do the very complicated. And like I said, Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand has a section where it goes into exactly kind of how to do that. So maybe look in the appendices and try to find that page in Liberation.
I guess my worry was that I say prayers, I do offerings, but I don't know where they're going because I'm not visualizing anything. Do they end up in the right place?
With my internet. So, of course, it's true that, the historical teachers will say that it's really quite important, to have the visualization, clear and so on. But, we also have to take our time and be reasonable, with it. So I think that really it's the intent, as with anything, I think it's really the intent behind it, and just really having a clear motivation, and really trying to just do our best, because it's going to evolve over time, So even really just trying to think that Lama Tsongkhapa and the Buddha, and one's guru, that they're all indistinguishable, and that they're all in the same nature, of the Dharmakaya, and just kind of having that idea in the mind, at the beginning is a wonderful.
You can have the idea in your mind that by making offerings to your guru through her or him, you're actually making offerings all the way back to the rest of the lineage. And if you really feel that.
Yeah, I would say it's more about, what's happening in the mind in terms of one's attitude, one's motivation, than it is, are all of the details correct? And, yeah, I mean, you find stories about, I think in liberation, you find some stories about, well, a person goes to their teacher and they say, well, I'm having this obstacle or this, and they say, well, how are you doing this practice? And then they're like, oh, you forgot, one out of these 100 different figures in your visualization. And so, yeah, there's different ways of thinking about it. But how many people really are able to have such a perfect visualization? I think we just start with thinking about it, having having a really sincere motivation, and just doing our best to really clearly identify that one's guru, Lama Tsongkhapa and the Buddha are all Dharmakaya.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Let's see. Anything that anybody particularly just was interested in or wanted to, that we haven't maybe touched on yet? Yeah, Doris.
Well, I just thought of a question. My altar's right here, and I pass by it like all day. Should I be respecting it in a certain way? Or, I mean, I do think of it when I pass by, but I mean, like, am I doing anything wrong?
I mean, I don't think that there's necessarily a right or wrong. In an ideal, again, a lot of it is psychological in terms of what really helps us to move the mind. So, having it kind of in a secluded space where maybe we don't go there that often. We mainly go there. Some people might say that the best scenario would be like a separate room, with an actual door, and you only go in there when your goal is to meditate. But most people just don't have the space to do that kind of thing. So they would say, don't necessarily, like, you wouldn't have it where you're going to eat. You wouldn't want to like eat in front of it or watch TV, in front of it. You want to kind of try to isolate your activities as much as you can. I would say that to give it a sort of sense of prominence and specialness in that way.
I'm here by myself, so I mean, I could put it anywhere, but this is my area, and I feel like I want it right here, and I do my work here. I mean, my practice. I don't have to worry about anybody else. It's pretty free form. I think in my mind, I was thinking, as long as I'm respectful of it every time I pass by, I'm okay. I acknowledge it, I even got some Tibetan to go with it. Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
It's good.
Mary, you had a question?
Yes, I do. So before the COVID, this little room, I painted it to make it my little gompa, and I live by myself, and this has always been like my little sanctuary room. But my computer is also stationary in this room. Like I really don't have another option where to move the electrical outlet and rig everything. And I've tried moving my altar to a different location in the house and it just doesn't feel right. But I just wonder, because I sometimes feel uncomfortable with it being the background on Zoom. And I just wonder, like, if I should do something like your picture background, if I should get a picture background and not have my personal space exposed. Like, I wonder if this is okay or not.
I mean, I think, if it makes you uncomfortable, I mean, people should do what, like I said, it's a psychological thing. So it's really about, one's own mind and what moves the mind in the right way. So, I mean, for me, I could just have like a white wall, behind me but I kind of want people to be able to see holy images too. And I I sort of try to position myself where I'm not, directly in front of, the holy images. But I want, I think it's nice that when people are looking at my image, they're also being able to see a Buddha. So they're also getting imprints, of the image of the Buddha, of, the different things. So if you think about it in terms of, you have prayer flags in the back. So if you think about you're offering the prayer flags to the people that are viewing your image, then it's kind of like this is part of your offering practice. So you can try to think about it that way, that you're wanting to share holy images with people who may not otherwise get a chance to see holy images. So you're helping people to get positive imprints in their own mind.
I like that, Venerable. Thank you. That was a great sentiment there.
I was just going to say the same thing. I was just going to say I like that.
I missed something. Doris, who said something like before that?
That was Donnie, I think.
Can't see me. I don't have a video on.
Yeah, sounded like her.
Yeah.
Lorraine, did you have a question?
Yes, I am easily distracted, so I'm wary of like an altar that would be too busy. But there are a lot of different deities for different purposes that I'd like to have on my altar when I can have one. I'm in a situation right now where I really can't. Best I can do is a Buddha screensaver on my TV. But when I do, I would love to have like white Tara and Buddha and green Tara and all the other ones, but I worry that my focus will get lost. Other than like making an altar for each one, is there a way to kind of center or focus?
I mean, I think it's very individual and very personal. I mean, it's when we're actually meditating, our eyes are mostly closed. Our eyes are, we're seated on the floor and the altar is a bit higher, than us. And, and so, our eyes are mostly closed and we're kind of just sort of looking, kind of more on the space in front of us. So, in that sense, I think whatever is on the altar, you probably wouldn't be so much in your visual field at that time. But I would say, we'll talk, maybe we'll go, Shanka said that, he kind of wants to go into some of the more details, but we'll spend some time looking at kind of the elements, I guess, a little bit today too. So maybe I would say to just start, with just the basics, just start with the bare minimum and then just kind of slowly add to it and just watch your mind, just see how it goes. See how, because, as I said, it should serve as a place for inspiration, a place that's calming. So, but it's true. I mean, I've heard other people kind of say, similar things, that, an altar that's taking up a lot of space where there's many, many different things, some people prefer something more minimalistic. That's fine. Sometimes people will do what are called side altars too. So, you'll have a front facing altar and then tables on either side. So then those images are kind of facing inward. So you'll have an altar here, and then you'll be here, and then you'll also be kind of flanked by two smaller side altars. So you'll have three altars, and then you're kind of in the middle. I don't know if that's worse for you or better, but then it's kind of, it's not all in one place. You could spread it out that way. You could have some of it here, some of it here, some of it here, rather than like it's just all kind of crammed into one space. At least it's then kind of spread out a little bit. And some people have just one table for offerings, so maybe their side table is just water bowls. That's also, and maybe they have one image on that altar, but it's just mainly water bowls. That's, another option.
Okay. Yeah, I was also going to ask if I'm in a kind of a confined space, but I want to do, say, if I want to focus on green tara one day and white tara the other day, if I had like the, what do you call them? The thangas, if I layered those and had them roll one up so the other one shows, would that be okay, or would that be kind of insulting to have one over the other?
Hey, I just
Yeah,
put in chat, I have a pop-up altar book. It's designed for travel, and it's really, really convenient. It's got green tara, it's got manjushri, it's got medicine Buddha, and it's really handy. You can break it down that way.
Okay, I'll check that out. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I personally wouldn't put one over the other like that. What you could do is maybe instead of like a full tanka, you could get maybe more like an 8x10, kind of a thing, and put it in a frame, and then maybe have like storage, like on the altar. Maybe get something that has built-in, like a built-in shelf with a door, and you can kind of have these, if you don't want to have a bunch of them out, you can kind of have these framed prints, stored, and then each day you take one of the framed prints out and you put that on the altar, or you get like a 4-inch or 6-inch statue, and you put that away and you bring that out. But for me personally, I wouldn't like on a wall kind of have, different tankas one on top of the other like that. I would do more like something like a cupboard or something with framed prints or something, and then you're sort of like taking a print out.
Okay, yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Any other? So we'll go into a couple specifics then, even though maybe I'm not supposed to. So in terms of this idea of offerings, this is specifically, we'll talk specifically about water bowls to start. So here I have the 8 offerings, but in terms of, and then I said water bowls, So the water bowls, there's really actually only 7. So there are 8 offerings in general, but then generally on an altar, you just have 7 water bowls. The 8th here is with the asterisk, and that's music. So most often for a kind of just general altar, music isn't typically represented. Sometimes for some pujas, it's represented, but usually just, and I mean, if you want to have, what they typically say is that the offering of music is provided by one's own voice. When one does the chanting, the refuge and bodhicitta prayer, what have you, one is providing that offering. You could have a damaru, on your altar if you wanted to represent, which is kind of a hand drum. You could do that if you wanted to, but generally the most common thing is 7 water bowls. So these 7 water bowls are here, as it said. The first is water for drinking, and then water for washing, flowers, light, incense, food, and perfume. And then again, so the 8th is music. But so when we talk about water bowls, then I would say there's a couple different things to keep in mind. One is kind of what kind of substance is the water bowl made out of, which you wouldn't think is important to think about, but it kind of is, because we're meant to try to keep the water bowls very clean, which is again kind of the psychological benefit of, if we use something that's visibly dirty, it doesn't benefit our own mind. We kind of associate that offering, with the unclean aspect of the offering vessel. So to benefit our own mind, we need to keep the offering vessel quite clean. And unfortunately, a lot of the traditional offering bowls that if you go to a Tibetan Buddhist website, a lot of them are metal. A lot of them are pewter or something like that, or brass, and they tend to discolor relatively quickly. You could seal it if you can get metal sealant. You could try that. You could polish. You could put some sort of polish and some kind of sealant, and that might protect it. But you're putting water in a metal vessel day after day, and it tends to discolor, and then it's not so good. To my way of thinking, you're looking at it and it looks discolored, and to my way of thinking, that's not so good. And so the way that you can either try to prevent that, or you kind of have to be using like a metal polish on a regular basis to kind of remove. And that can be a practice, that can be a wonderful, to be polishing your offering vessels on a weekly. That can be a practice too, if you want to. But in my mind, the easiest thing is to get offering bowls that are glass or crystal, because you can put water in those all day, every day, and you just run them through the dishwasher every once in a while, and it's good to go. You never have to deal with it discoloring in any way. That would be my recommendation, is glass or crystal. Yeah. So then the other part of this is, particularly in terms of flowers, light, incense, food, and perfume, practically speaking, how you might do that. And what I mean by this is the idea of what's called the actual substances. That would mean, that would mean not using water for these things. That would mean that, so one way, the easy way of doing the 7 water bowls is that they're literally all just water. But the more traditional, or again, going with this idea of really practicing generosity and really making this something that is more of an effort, is that for the water bowl of flowers, light, incense, food, and perfume, you're actually using what are called the actual substances. So you would put a flower blossom in the water bowl for flowers. You would put a little tea light in the water bowl for light. You would put a stick of incense for the incense. You would put maybe a piece of fruit for the food. And then maybe you might use saffron water for the perfume offering. And then you might, but you might also use saffron water for drinking and water for washing. So that's another way of doing it. And to kind of step back a little bit and talk about why these are the offerings that they are, the kind of theory behind it is that when we do many of the practices that we might do, we are invoking the energy of the enlightened beings. We're invoking, again, when you might invoke the refuge field, the merit field. You might be doing a variety of practices, visualizing enlightened beings and so on. And the idea is that because enlightened mind pervades the universe, that any time that a sentient being particularly concentrates on that energy, it is as if they are invoking that energy truly with them in their space. So these offerings are related to this idea of, well, if I'm inviting enlightened beings into my space, in the same way that when I have a friend, a good friend come over, how would I set up my environment to be pleasing to them, and how would I kind of make myself of service to them? Well, what you would do is you would offer them something to drink. They would come over, and the first thing, that's just kind of, common courtesy. You say, can I get you something to drink? And would you like to wash up? Would you like to wash up a bit? And then in your space, you might set out flowers, you might set out some candles, or you might and you might want it to smell nice. You might want it to have a pleasing, inviting aroma. And then you would offer them some food. You'd offer them something to eat. And you would want, yourself to also smell nice. And then you might say, well, would you like to adorn yourself also, maybe with some, after you've washed up, here's some deodorant, here's some cologne. Would you like to kind of spruce yourself up a little bit? So these are all of the kinds of things that we psychologically do when we're trying to benefit anyone that we're inviting into our space. And so we're just thinking about it in the same way. We're thinking about, since we're invoking enlightened mind, we're trying to make it really beneficial, really useful, really nice, really pleasing. And again, also psychologically, if we're going to do this when our friend comes over, then certainly we would want to do this when we're invoking enlightened mind. We don't want to think about that as being less than what happens when we have a good friend come over. We want to think about it, as being of service, in the same way. And then, you put on some jazz, some tunes to listen to. And so, this is all about creating, what are the things that we do when we're trying to create a really pleasant, enjoyable experience for someone that we care about, for someone that we're trying to to relate to positively. So we're just trying to do it in the same way, is the idea. Yeah. So, like I said, you can, and another way, it's also true that, you could also have other ways of doing flowers, light, incense, food. You could also just have an incense burner on your altar. You could also have candle, little votive candle holders. So you can make these offerings also in other ways, but perhaps in terms of this line of, because you can kind of see, well, not right now, but when you do the 7 water bowls, they're in a straight line. So perhaps in some way too, having the actual substances in these specific line of water bowls also helps you to kind of see it as a complete practice, as a complete environment of these are the 7 things that I do when I'm invoking enlightened mind to be present with me in my space. So, whether you want to kind of have them represented on the altar generally, or whether you want to certainly, whether you want to specifically make sure that they're in this line of water bowls, I would say up to you. But it's quite good to at least have the actual substances of flowers, light, incense, food, represented on the altar. And some people have, can't necessarily light an entire stick of incense. I've never really lit an entire, because they can burn for 45 minutes, and it can really create a good deal of smoke, and it's maybe not so good to breathe in all of that if you've got a small space. So certainly you can light a small amount of incense, rather than, you don't have to feel like you have to always light and let an entire stick of incense burn. I don't personally like putting incense out, because again, there's sort of a karmic connection to these things. So I personally, it doesn't move my mind well to light it and then let it burn and then extinguish it, then kind of rub it out and turn, make it. So I feel like it's better to just break off a smaller piece and allow that to fully burn, rather than making an offering and then rubbing out the offering. In the same way, I also prefer, if I'm going to light an actual candle, to let that candle burn out. Of course, if you have to go somewhere, then you don't want candles burning on your altar. So that's, of course, but for me, I only light an actual physical candle if I plan on kind of being around for the duration to make sure that it's safe and so on. Because again, for my own mind, I don't like making the offering and then taking the offering away. That's just my own perspective, my own mind. So this gets at the idea that we can also offer electric light on the altar. It certainly doesn't have to be candle light. It's of course much safer to offer electric light. I don't want anyone to burn their house down. So, if you feel like electric light is the way to go, I agree with you. That's a good way to go. There's there's LED lights, there's all kinds of things you can do that are much safer than actually burning candles. But having something that is a light on your altar is wonderful and very useful to have. And you can even let that go depending on where it is, and if it's not going to disturb anyone, you can let that light go 24 hours a day as an offering. if there's LEDs or something, if it's not going to disturb your sleep, then you can have that just on all of the time as an offering, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then with food, like I said, you could just put an apple or something in that one bowl, for the food offering, or you could have a larger bowl filled with fruit or, crackers or chocolate or, something like that. I know that some people will kind of just every day, every time they go shopping, they'll come home with their shopping bag and they'll put their shopping bag on the altar, and leave it there for some period of time. Maybe they would put the frozen things away, first, and it's kind of just the non-perishable things, or maybe even, they just only leave the perishable things there for a shorter time and they leave the other things there for a longer time. But that way they literally offer everything that they buy, at least for some period of time, on their altar. That's also an option. If you do that, I feel like it's quite good. I just, again, I'm just kind of sharing things that I think are helpful, that I have found helpful. I feel like it's quite good that if something is going to be an offering, that we try to think of it from the very beginning as this is going to be an offering, rather than like, oh, I don't have anything, like what can I kind of find in my house that I can sort of now think of as an offering. So what I mean is, when we go to the store, if we're going to do that, we should think, I am buying this to be my offering on my altar. And if we're going to do that with everything, then fantastic. But even then, like as we're picking it out, as we're in, and this is also part of the psychological process of this, we can actually kind of think of it as being an offering even from that first moment that we are picking it out, because we're like, what, which, when we're looking in the produce department, trying to find the best, the nicest looking apple, the nicest looking, because we want to make the best possible offering to the refuge field when we're doing that. And then we can even kind of at that moment feel like, my hand is reaching out to pick up the offering. I'm putting the offering in the basket. I'm then paying for the offering and I'm bringing the offering home. And we can kind of make the whole process a meditation. We can bring the whole process onto the path. I feel like that's the ideal way to do it, is to really, to not just, buy incense because we like the way that the incense smells, and like maybe sometimes we light the incense just because like someone's coming over and we're worried that it's kind of musty, and we're trying to cover something up. Like we always really want to try to think about, I'm buying this for my altar and it's going to stay on my altar, and it's for that purpose. It's for the purpose of offering. And this gets into the other kind of psychological piece, that everything related to our altar really should just be for our altar. So the offering bowls shouldn't do like double duty. We shouldn't like, use cereal bowls and then like wash the cereal bowls. And now they're the altar bowls. And sometimes, everything that's on the altar needs to just stay on the altar, and it's just for the altar. And this even applies to the vessel that we use to fill the water bowls and the vessel that we use to take the water down. We should have a pitcher that is only for filling the water bowls, and we should have some sort of receptacle that's only for holding the water that we use when we are clearing the water bowls. And they say that this purpose is so that we can be sure that we never reuse the same water. Because if you have just a pitcher, let's say, then, and if you use that also to take the water down, then the next day there could be some residue of that left in the pitcher. You didn't maybe intentionally, but there's some residue left. So to really be very clear about it, you just have a receptacle that only holds the water that you are finished with. And then you only have a receptacle that holds the new water. So you never kind of, so you're always making a new offering every day. It's the best way to do that. Yeah. So this is maybe Shanka would also have. I didn't know about this mantra for like a long time because nobody told me. So I just think it's good to kind of this is specifically for, and I don't know. I tried a little bit to kind of find if there was a meaning, like if there was an English sort of meaning of the mantra. Maybe if somebody does know it, they can share. I couldn't find the meaning of the mantra. Maybe Shanka next week can tell you if he knows the meaning of the mantra. But this is the mantra that Lama Zopa Rinpoche recommends for if you've made an offering of food on your altar and then you're going to take that down and you're going to consume the food, which I recommend you do. We don't make offerings of food and then throw the food away. We make offerings of food and then we eat the food. But we kind of recite this mantra on the offering after we've taken it down, and that kind of makes it allowable karmically, kind of purifies, because we've made an offering. When we made the offering, we were making the offering to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So we've kind of said, well, this is yours now. This is your food. And then if we just take it down, we kind of want to karmically sort of clear that the energy that's associated with it having belonged to them. And this is what Lama Zopa recommends to do that. So my Tibetan is about as bad as it can be. Tayata idam pene ratna pamani paratna ni soha is about as good as I can do. Shanka, I think, is much better at mantra than I am. So I would ask him to go over that with you guys again if you want. But so you recite that 3 times and then you blow on the food. Because you're kind of blessing your speech with the mantra when you recite it 3 times, and then you blow on the food when you're taking the food down. Is there somebody with their hand up? Is there a question? Doris.
No, that sounded like Sanskrit. If you send me the email of it, I'll translate it. Anyway, did you get my email?
Just from when?
A few days ago. Remember that group we had with what was her name? I hate to say it this way, but the black girl. There was a woman there that I was paired with that I want to be in touch with again. I sent you an email.
Yes, I haven't heard back from Dr. Shambrook yet.
Nice. Thank you so much. Sorry to bring it up here, but I'm just rude.
I have a question. It's okay. Used water. What I've been doing with the water is watering plants. Is that acceptable?
Yes. So when we take the water down at the end of the day, what they say is that they say it's best not to. What I've generally heard is that it's best not to consume the water oneself. It's better to make an because it was an offering, right? You offered it, so you. I mean, generally, I generally haven't heard. I've read some things somewhere about people, using it to make tea or something, that they themselves consume. I haven't seen that recommended. So what I've seen recommended is offering it to plants, or taking it out, and at least putting it on what they call clean ground. So of course, ground is made of dirt, but when they say clean ground, they mean ground that animals are not relieving themselves on, that you're not aware of, that like it's a place where animals are so like if you live in a building or something and that like this is the dead piece of grass because this is where everyone brings their dog, like you don't dump it there. You find like a tree, you find like a shrub or something that seems kind of isolated, and it seems that, of course you can never know. Of course it's always possible there's animals in the outdoors. You can never be sure that it's clean ground, but you kind of just do your best to think of it as clean, that what you can reasonably imagine is clean ground, or to house plants or to other kinds of plants is the way to go.
Thank you, Venerable. My food offering is chocolate. And if I take it down every day and consume it, does it have to be taken down every day?
No, because that's going to last for a while. So no, people have to just decide like what their own process is, because like with flowers also, some people make offerings of flowers maybe once a week. With offerings, as I said, psychologically, we want it to be pleasing. So like with flowers, as soon as the flowers start to turn, you would remove them, whether it's cut flowers or a living, and so again, a living plant is also a way of being able to have it there for longer. But as soon as the flowers start to turn, you would take them down. You don't have to throw them away right away. If they've just kind of started to turn, you could just move them to somewhere else. But you don't want to sit there and be looking at flowers that are like progressively getting less and less attractive. As soon as they start to turn, you want to at least move them into the living room or, do something else with them. And so with food, it can be whatever you want it to be. It can be once a week, once every 2 weeks. It can be different things. You can do whatever you want with it. But again, you never would want to leave food on there to where it starts to turn. So if you're putting like bananas on there, like a bunch of bananas, you don't just let it rot, on the altar. You don't let it start to turn brown. You take it down when it's, still quite nice to look at. And
I can't do fruit here. This building for some other, in the summertime, it's like fruit flies. So I can manage to stay free of them if I don't do that. But I think I'm actually practicing great restraint to walk by all that chocolate every day. Many, many times a day. So I'm practicing.
Yeah, that's kind of the other aspect of it too, is that we do want to leave the food on there for a respectable amount of time, which, as you're saying, is like kind of that sense of restraint. So we don't, if it's something really delicious, something that we're really looking forward to, we don't want to put it on there and then 5 minutes later be like, oh, okay, I offered it, so I can just eat it now. We do want to leave it on there, for 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours at least, rather than like, I bought this chocolate cake really for me, but kind of for the Buddhas for like 10 seconds, but really for me. We don't want to have it like that. We want to really offer it. We want to really think, this is not mine. This is for, this is something I am offering. I'm cutting off my attachment to it completely. But then I also don't want it to go to waste. So I will actually eat it. But we want to really make it a genuine offering by having it there for a good amount of time, 12 hours a day. Mary, did you have a question?
It's not really a question, but when you were talking about the saffron water, that's something that I have always had been attracted to, or had an affinity for, but I never really understood how to make it or anything like that. And so I did get a recipe from one of the nuns, and I can share it if you want. So you get a pot about this size, and then you get a little thing of saffron, and you put like a pinch of saffron in this size pot, and you boil it for like 20 or 30 minutes. And correct me if I'm wrong, Venerable Dondrub, but you kind of just wait till it gets really dark yellow, and then you put it in I put it in a mason jar with a label on it in the fridge, and it's like this dark yellow color. And then I don't know, I eyeball it, but I'll pour maybe like 1/8 of a cup into the pitcher of water. So it's a concentrate. That's what it is. This is a saffron concentrate. Oh, but so you have your saffron threads, boil it, and then when it's done boiling, I have a little strainer, because you're going to have all those little threads from the saffron. But I have like Venerable Dondrub said, I have a little silver, strainer that I only use for this water and for this saffron. But it was a mystery to me. For years, I didn't understand what saffron water was or how to make it. But that's the recipe.
Yeah. Sometimes I, because once you, and there's different. I mean, I don't think that there's one right way to do it. There's different ways, and but what you can do is just, bring the water to a boil, put it in, and then usually I just turn the heat off at that point, and then just put a lid on, and just let it sit there for a couple of hours until it totally cools down. I feel like that probably works just as well. Either way. But, and then what Lama Zopa says, there's different perspectives on the actual offering. I think that the water should be at least, I think different geshes or different monasteries have had different ideas about how much of the concentrate. And of course, it depends on the size of your water bowls too, because some water bowls are really tiny. Some of the traditional water bowls usually are quite small, but if you were to get like just glass, because you don't, as I said, as long as you only use it for your offering bowls, the offering bowls themselves can be anything. As long as that's their only purpose, you can get them at a restaurant store or what have you, as long as you're not doing other things with them. So you can get larger ones, as you can cut. Well, you still can't, because I'm used to. You can kind of see that the ones I have are a little bit larger than. Yeah, these actually were from a Buddhist store, but some water bowls are really, really tiny, and these are a little bit bigger. So that's going to depend. That will affect your total volume of water, and then of course the amount of concentrate to the total volume is how your color will turn out. And it should be at least, they say at least like the color of like a champagne. So at least a pale, when you actually use it, should at least be a pale yellow. And sometimes I've found too that maybe in different parts of the country, or they add, maybe it's the chlorine that they add, but the color can actually really fade over a day. I don't know if that happens everywhere or to everyone, or if it has to do with the chemicals in the water, but I found that oftentimes the color can fade. So you might want to start with a little bit strong. And I don't know, some people, when I've done this at like a center before, I would always make it really a really vibrant yellow, and I was actually told that like that was wrong. So, and again, because it has to, in terms of, I don't know, the texts, I guess, that these texts that the different monasteries, but at the same time, like from my perspective, that was my offer. Like I was doing it because that was the strength of my offering in my mind. So it disturbed my mind actually to make it be less than that. But there's some, and I haven't asked like Eshe Sherab what his views are, and haven't really asked any lamas what this was just sort of a person who had read something or heard something kind of about these standards. And I think there's a text, if you want to get, FPMT has a text called the Preliminary Practice of Water Bowls and Altar Setup. That's a sort of text that you can get. And I think in there, Lama Zopa alludes to the fact that there have been different historical ideas about what color your saffron water should end up being. So all I can say is you probably should ask Eshe Sherab what the right answer is, because I don't know what the right answer is. But yeah, but Geshe Sherab can tell you the right answer. I can just give you my personal experience. Yep. Okay, so we'll leave it there for today, and Chanka will pick up with the next two classes where he'll go into more detail on altars and also the idea of a session of meditation. He wanted to, I think maybe what he'll start with is the preliminary practices, the 7 preliminary practices he wanted to start with. So we can pretend that we started that today. Like he wanted cleaning your space. We'll leave with the very first of the preliminary practices, which is to clean one's space. So we should always the space around one's altar and the altar itself. We should always try to keep clean, because again, psychologically, if the space is tidy, if it's clean, then that will help us to move into and then we won't be distracted. We won't be like, why is this sock, over here in the corner, and I'm trying to meditate, but there's like laundry, and, so you really want to, really every single day in the space where you're going to meditate, you want to look, you want to tidy it up. You want to have like a little Swiffer cloth or something and run it over the top of the altar. You want to kind of Swiffer the statues, with like a dust cloth. You really want to, and maybe you vacuum a little bit. You really want to keep that area clean. And that's a practice. That's a meditative practice. So you can ask, I'll probably encourage Shanka to look at the video to see what we covered. But we didn't really cover like the meditations that you can do when you're making water bowl offerings. So you can make a note to like ask him about the meditations that accompany doing the water bowl practice. Because again, psychologically, we shouldn't just be distracted and thinking about, what's for dinner when we're doing water bowls. We should turn that into a meditative practice, and there are specific ways of doing that. So there's a lot more that in the next 2 classes that y'all will go into. But yeah, we're out of time. So let's dedicate. So recollect your motivation and think that you've actualized your motivation to find tools and techniques to be of benefit. And then think that you offer the actualization of your motivation, that positive energy. You offer that, the ripening of that for the benefit of all sentient beings without exception. Okay. Well, thanks for coming. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Venerable.